Hey there, practice of the practice community. Are you ready to take your private practice to the next level? Then mark your calendars for September 16th through 19th, 2024, because Level Up Week is back and bigger than ever. Insert rocket emoji here. Join us for 4 days of live webinars, interactive panels, and exclusive resources tailored just for counselors, therapists, and private practice owners. Whether you're looking to fill your caseload, hire your first clinician, or scale your group practice, we've got you covered. This is your chance to level up while others give up. Don't miss out on this game-changing event. Register now at practiceofthepractice.com/level up and get ready to transform your practice. Remember, September 16th through 19th, Level Up Week, your ticket to practice success. Register today and let's level up together. Practiceofthepractice.com/level up. This is the Practice of the Practice podcast with Joe Sanok, session number 1072. I'm Joe Sanok, your host, and welcome to the Practice of the Practice podcast. It's early September, and we are hanging out with you. My kids are back in school, and at the time of this recording, they're not in school, so it's kind of weird to talk about. But I know that schedule, like I'm already, as I'm recording this a little bit ahead of time, dreading having to get up so early. I am such a night owl, and mornings are just rough for me sometimes. So it'll be fun to have them back in school, but man, we had an awesome summer too. So we had a lot of good relaxation, and at the beginning of the summer, kind of tried to talk about some things that we really wanted to do. My partner and I also talked about like what can we do that's fun this summer, and went to a yurt in Canada, which was fun. But we don't always do that. There was a time in my life when I remember I was working full-time in foster care. I was a supervisor. I had my side gig counseling practice going. I had a young baby with heart issues. Things were not easy, and I was definitely headed towards burnout. I remember my eye started twitching weird, and it just like wouldn't stop. It just kept twitching. And so I ended up switching jobs. I took a job over at the community college. I reevaluated how much I was doing my private practice. I started doing some self-care things like starting to curl, and then started doing improv. And those are things that now like are really a part of my life. I don't curl anymore, even though we have like one of the best curling facilities in the nation. Like Olympians come practice here in Traverse City. But improv is still one of those things that is a non-negotiable. That at least every Tuesday, this coming Sunday, got an improv show where we do this kind of murder mystery, fake true crime podcast, where we ask the audience for a ridiculous murder weapon, and then we ask them for a ridiculous place to get murdered, and we create this like 45-minute to an hour long fake improvised true crime podcast that's all about this small town where someone got murdered with. One of it was an eggplant in a lighthouse, and then the second one was with a microphone in a laser tag arena. So just this kind of like ridiculous, just fun thing to do. Those things help me mitigate some of the burnout. And today I'm really excited because we are going to be talking with Julie B. Julie B is a burnout strategist, author, and speaker, and works with business owners who are usually somewhere between just keeping their heads above water and ready to walk away from their business entirely. And after working with Julie, most clients protect not only themselves from burnout, but also they protect their teams. So Julie, welcome to the Practice of the Practice podcast.
Thanks for having me, Joe. I'm happy to be here today.
Yeah, I'm so excited to have you here today. I think burnout is one of those things that we recognize in our clients. We're like, oh man, that marketing guy or that business woman, boy, they're headed towards burnout. But then a lot of therapists don't even realize how much is kind of on their shoulders and how much is being transferred to them with people's trauma and hearing stories all day. So I'm so excited to have you on the show today.
Yeah, and your audience, they are so needed, and I can't even imagine the weight of what they handle on a daily basis with seeing their clients. So I'm excited to get into this, and I'm happy to be able to spread this message to this audience as well.
Yeah, well, I found that whenever anyone specializes in a specific area, there's usually some stories as to how burnout became something that they care about. So tell me, how did you get into burnout as something that you know wanted to spend your career working on?
Yeah, I mean, the really abbreviated answer is I went through my own burnout and I saw how much burnout was impacting my small business owner friends. I'm very passionate about small business ownership. I think we have to have our entrepreneurs and our small businesses in our community to make sure we have diverse and thriving local communities. So that was really that's the passion behind it, is really the protection of that small business and entrepreneurial spirit. Longer story is I had a massive burnout in 2021 where I went to the emergency room thinking that I was having a heart attack, and it turns out I was having a panic attack. I just had way too much on my plate. I was volunteering, I was running a multi six figure marketing agency with a whole bunch of employees, and I just kind of hated my job. It was, and it's really hard when it's the job you create for yourself and then you end up hating it. You know, how do you untangle all of that? So I had that experience, and then I realized I had to do something different. I had to change. And what was incredibly frustrating is that when I went out and looked for resources, specifically for business owners, specifically for entrepreneurs, there really wasn't anything out there for business owners about burnout. And this was right after the first major wave of COVID. So you would think, I mean, burnout, we were talking about burnout in every single industry, but there wasn't anything out there for business owners. And I thought that was incredibly, I just couldn't believe it, quite frankly. And I went ahead and documented my system for getting through burnout, put it into a book, got a book deal, and I've been talking about it ever since. And it's just somebody has to carry that flag. And I'm one of those people who's really willing to be vulnerable and open. And I just feel very passionate about protecting the small business the small business spirit in our communities. And so that's kind of how I got into this and dedicated. I feel like I'll be talking about this for the rest of my life.
Mm. Well, I love a number of things that you said, that you realized that you had created something that you wanted to leave. Now, I totally, when you said that, I almost paused you, but you were on a roll. So I'm like, I'm going to let you keep going. Um, but like, I remember at mental wellness counseling, the business I had started, you know, it exploded. We had 13 clinicians. We were all private pay. It's like I was able to leave my full-time job. And then realizing, oh my gosh, like, I don't like doing counseling anymore. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I found that when I had a podcast on my schedule and I had, you know, a counseling session on my schedule, I was looking forward to that podcast. And there was a point where I realized, like, this is not fair to these clients. If I'm not looking forward to doing therapy with people, I shouldn't be doing therapy. And it's not like you can just like drop the mic and walk away. But then it was like, okay, what's my 3-month plan here to really reduce things down to the handful of clients that I enjoy working with, or that, you know, really aren't going to transition very well. And then what's the plan for selling off that side of the business, you know, within a couple of years? And you know, that worked, but it was such a change in identity for me, where it's like you go to grad school and you're a psychologist and, you know, you're a therapist and you do all this licensure and then you do all that and then say, like, I don't want to do it. So that stood out to me. And then also, I love how you said I documented my process, wrote a book, and then got a book deal. So often therapists that I hear from, you know, have these thoughts of like, oh, like, who's going to want to hear from me? Who's going to want to, you know, buy my book? I have this idea. And it's like, you know, you went through an experience, you captured that experience, and then someone said, hey, let's tell the world about this experience. I want to hear a little bit more about that process. And then I do want to hear, you know, obviously your tips on burnout and things like that. But that process of going through something and then shifting and saying, I'm going to create content and do a book. How did that happen?
Well, I think it started with my background. I mean, I did marketing for 15 years. I was a digital marketing agency owner for 15 years. So when they always say some of the greatest businesses start out of a need that isn't filled yet. And so when I realized that the best resources out there for business owners at that time for burnout were a handful of blog posts that basically told you to do less and take vacations, I realized there was probably a market for what I could offer. And all it really took was for me to be very process oriented, which I already was and am, and to be willing and vulnerable enough to share my story with people, and talk about burnout. So that's kind of how that happened. And then, it honestly it took me about 2 years to transition from running my marketing agency to winding that down to exiting it to now doing this as my full-time day job. And I think, one thing I wanted to mention was very interesting is a lot of the burnout resources that are out there operate on an assumption that you are working for somebody else and that it's the workplace is the problem. And my question is, and what I'm trying to solve here is, okay, what if you created the workplace? And that is a solve that I think, I'm uniquely positioned to work on. And that's really what I'm working on is, we create our workplaces. And then it's a very common thing where business owners get to the point where they kind of hate what they're doing. They fall out of love with their business. And I've seen everything from people, just walking away from a business to self-sabotage to just a lot of things. So I want to prevent as much of that as possible and also normalize that experience for business owners because it happens. I mean, most people don't stay in a career like, you don't go and work at the same employer for 40 years anymore. So I don't know why business owners would be expecting themselves to do the same thing. And I think it's something that we need to plan for. So that's kind of that's the first answer to that first part of the question.
Hmm. Yeah. So take us through like what did you start to document? So you're going through this process. Like, take us from your experience into then now what you teach.
Yeah, so I documented my own process and then I did 300 interviews with small business owners, a variety of industries, variety of sizes, and years in business. And out of those 300 interviews, only 5 people said that they had never been burned out in their business. So I documented a lot of stories. And then from there, I basically beta tested multiple times my own process for people who were currently experiencing burnout and just kind of tested it on them and made sure that, what I was putting in the book, or at the time I was just, kind of keeping track and writing what I was doing, but just making sure the process worked for other people, which it did. And then, from there, I went and basically, got the book deal, realized I was really on to something. And um, what was really interesting, Joe, at that time was there were only, I want to say I could only find two, two or three, there were 2 or 3 studies specifically about business owners and burnout at that time. And so the research part was really more about doing interviews and reaching out to business owners that I knew and business owners that I met because there wasn't already, there wasn't established research about business owners and burnout. There were like 3 studies, one done by, Capital One. So got to take that with a grain of salt. But and most of them had been done prior to COVID. So it was really, I had to do a ton of research through interviews and then kind of, put all that information, aggregate that information and put it into a book and also test the process that I was teaching.
Hmm. So, as you start to bring that together, what were some of the kind of top maybe reasons that entrepreneurs burn out?
I think the top reason is financial burden for 3 to 4 entities. Uh, when you run a business, you're not only financially responsible for your own paycheck, what you take home. You're responsible for your business, you're responsible for your employees who work for you. And sometimes, depending on the industry, you also feel very responsible financially for your clients. Like if you're in a financial advisory firm or if you even marketing agency owners, I felt that, I just wanted to make sure my clients were doing well financially, CPAs, that type of thing. So one of the biggest things is financial, just the burden of it. Even if you are doing well and you have the cash flow flowing, there's still that pressure to like always make sure you're going to make payroll, always make sure you can pay your bills, always make sure you can pay yourself. And, Also, for some, make sure your clients are doing well financially. So that is a big one. The other thing is, funnily enough, and I think you alluded to this, growth. Most business owners that I work with who are just beyond burned out, they're experiencing substantial growth, and they have not been able to figure out how to practice growth management, which is a thing in business. More businesses die of overconsumption than of not having enough to eat. So I think a lot of people think that burnout is maybe more for people who aren't doing well, which that is also there, but that's a different thing to handle than people who are growing and they can't keep up with the growth. There's not enough of them to go around. Sometimes they don't have enough money yet to hire somebody, or they're scared to hire somebody, or they waited too long to get the help that they need. I see that way more frequently than the other side, where people are not growing and kind of stagnant. So those are two of the biggest reasons that I see business owners burn out. There's a lot of other reasons too, but those are probably the top two.
Yeah. Now, what do you see people do about it, or what do you recommend people do about it?
The, I have kind of a standard. The first two things are: one, you got to say no to new opportunities for just a little while. So a lot of us who are a lot of business owners, we get into this feast or famine mentality, and we worry that if we say no to something, it won't be there, 6 months from now or 3 months from now, or we'll miss out on something. There's that FOMO thing, and I think business owners, it's 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 just that feast or famine mentality. If you have something show up, you want to say yes to it, whether that's like a speaking engagement or a volunteer opportunity, or sometimes even new clients. If they're not a perfect fit client, sometimes you want to say no to that. So that's the first thing, is just saying no in a very temporary time frame, to new opportunities. And that's mainly to just make sure you're not putting more stuff on your plate that's already overflowing. And then the second thing is I help business owners identify larger initiatives that they have going on in their business. So, for example, maybe they think they want to find a new office space, or maybe they've started a rebrand, or maybe they've started a new, social media marketing campaign. Um, all of these, maybe they're launching a training initiative in their company. So just like those bigger initiatives, those things that are not day to day, I also look to see what we can pause there, just to create some space for a short period of time, so that you can actually deal with burnout. Because burnout, it requires some time, it requires some energy in order to actually deal with it. And if you don't deal with it, it can really go down a pretty dark path where, I mean, I know business owners, I'm talking things like divorce, businesses going out of business, heart attacks, strokes. Like, business owners experience those types of things due to that overwhelming, never ending stress that is underlying pretty much any burnout. That's where it comes from, is you just got stress you cannot manage. So we got to say no to the new things temporarily, and also look for what we can pause, so that we can make some space for you to actually deal with your burnout, to recover from it, to address whatever caused it in the first place, and then also figure out how to prevent it going forward.
Mm. As a therapist, I can tell you from experience that having the right EHR is an absolute lifeline. I recommend using Therapy Notes. They make billing, scheduling, note-taking, telehealth, and e-prescribe incredibly easy. Best of all, they offer live telephone support that's available 7 days a week. You don't have to take my word for it. Do your own research and see for yourself. Therapy Notes is the #1 highest rated EHR system available today, with a 4.9 out of 5 stars on trustpilot.com and on Google. All you have to do is click the link below, or type promo code Joe on their website over at therapynotes.com and receive a special 2-month trial absolutely free. Again, that's therapynotes.com, and use promo code Joe on the website. If you're coming from another EHR, Therapy Notes will also import your demographic data quick and easy at no cost, so you can get started right away. Trust me, don't waste any more of your time and try Therapy Notes. Just use promo code Joe at checkout. Now, when you look at your own kind of habits, I love kind of hearing how people implement the thing they teach. When you think about what your week, your day, your month, your year, like what kind of rhythms do you have that help you maybe stay focused on things that will not burn you out, stay focused on things that bring you joy, stay focused on things outside of your work, so you're not just like, a human working, but a
Mhm.
human being. Like what kind of habits or rhythms do you have that help you avoid burnout?
I have a few things, and I'm really big on, specifically for preventing burnout, on things that you can measure in one way or another. So, the biggest thing for me is sleep. I have a sleep app on my phone that if I'm not getting the right amount of sleep, that thing will tell me. It keeps track of my sleep debt, and just like any other debt, I will work to work that off. If it gets over, like, if I get over 5 hours of sleep debt on that thing, I will clear my calendar the next morning or two to let myself have like more sleep, that not sleep in, but just have more sleep in the morning, not have to get up quite as early. So that's one thing. Another thing that I do is I have a what I call a forced hobby. I'm a big fan of a forced hobby, and the way that I live that is I volunteer for a local I'm on a board of directors, and that I'm probably one of the only people who say that was probably one of the smartest things I've done, because it forces me to stop working, shift gears, and go volunteer at least once a month. And once a year we actually volunteer for a whole week. So that kind of forces me to um be out of work. To not just be sitting in my office and working all day long every day. And then the other thing I do is I swim. So I go swimming 3 times a week. That's kind of the minimum. Sometimes I go more. Sometimes, if I don't go 3 times a week, I try to make it up the following week. But swimming is something I love, the water. And that is something that I do as well. And then the other thing that's a little bit harder to track, but I know in my gut if it's not happening, is I have to make sure, or I always want to laugh with my partner. And my goal is to laugh with her once a day, like just really have a hearty laugh. We probably average more like five times a week or something like that. But just to laugh at something with her, that even if it's about, sometimes it's about my work, sometimes it's about her work, sometimes it's about like nothing to do with work. It just depends. But those are four very specific things, and that's kind of what I do with my clients when we're talking about like not only recovering from burnout, from what it's cost you, but also preventing burnout. I look for some very specific things that can be measured pretty easily. Those are all things like, my board meeting is on my calendar, so I can look back at my calendar and say, well, yeah, I did that this month. Or, my sleep tracker is on my phone, so I see that every morning. So just things that are measurable, I think, is really the key to preventing burnout, because I think everybody wants to eat healthy, or most people do. Most people want to eat healthy, most people want to get enough sleep, most people want to spend time with their family and friends, and most people don't want to work 24/7. But unless you create some measurable, we'll just call them KPIs, they're burnout indicators. Unless you create some measurable boundaries around that, it's really hard to stay on track and prevent burnout unless you have those types of things that can be measured.
Mm. Yeah, I love that idea of thinking about KPIs, in regards to how you're measuring and thinking about things. I'm reading this book by Scott Galloway called The Algebra of Wealth, and I followed him on TikTok and then saw him on like The Daily Show. And the guy I like how he thinks through money differently than kind of typical money people. But one thing he was talking about was with your hobbies, and maybe a third of the way through right now, with your hobbies, to itemize them and think about them as anything that isn't making you money and doesn't have the potential to. Because I think some people do things that they say are quote hobbies, but really it's like, oh, this might help me with my business. And then he said, to to put things towards the top that you do with other people that you love. So partners, kids, good friends, and then also to try to have at least one hobby that you're moving your body. So for you, that's swimming. For me and Claire, that's pickleball. We don't do it enough, but every time we do, we're like, why don't we do this more? Like, it's fun. And, like, I don't know, we're terrible and get walloped by people way older than us. But it's like, I think that idea of being intentional instead of just defaulting is such an important thing. Lots of the people that we're talking to today or that are listening to us, they own private practices. They're in counseling. We're taught about burnout. We're taught about these things. We often don't implement them. It's kind of that like heal yourself kind of thing. But when they're in sessions with people, what are some strategies that you have found work to help motivate people, help people to see their burnout differently, to feel inspired to change? Like, what are some techniques that maybe you'd encourage therapists to use in their sessions with their clients?
I think one thing to really be I guess, aware of is, and it's funny, it's something that I've struggled with running this business, is not, there's a stigma around burnout that it's a negative thing. And I think that's honestly, if I was sitting in a therapist, if I was a therapist, I would just be really, really aware of, not labeling, not labeling something as burnout for a client, having them label themselves as burned out. And there's a lot of code words. Look, there's like overwhelmed, there's stressed, there's fatigued, there's exhausted, there's cynical, there's disengaged, disassociated. Like, there are a lot of words that could be code words for burnout. So I think that's the first thing, is just to be on the lookout for those code words that people might use instead of saying that they're burned out. I find that, especially when people go through their first burnout, they wait to actually say that they're burned out until they are so burned out that I don't even know how to help them. I mean, that's usually, other than tell them to go see their doctor and get in with a therapist. I give that advice to people who come to me who are that far along in burnout. So just know, like, there are code words for that. And then the other thing I would say is just, try to help them figure out what's causing the burnout. And sometimes it's really obvious, and sometimes it's comes from the things that have just become their kind of day-to-day slog through life. It might be they have to commute 2 hours or 2.5 hours a day to a job that they hate, or it might be, but they have to do it anyways because they have to pay their mortgage, they have to pay their bills, or it might be they're in a relationship that is really unhealthy and really unhelpful. So I think it's just really important to have the person actually tell you, what is going on. And I know therapists are extremely skilled at that. So asking the right questions. One question I love to ask people is, what are you tolerating? And that really gets at the heart of, what are you just putting up with to get
Oh,
by?
I love that. What are you tolerating?
Because I think
What answers?
sometimes,
I gotta ask you, what crazy answers have you heard without telling someone's name and identifying things? I'm sure
yeah, I
people
mean,
tell you some crazy things that they're putting up with.
a lot of times, well, first of all, that's a question that shocks people. They're not expecting me to ask that question. And I usually don't ask it until they've kind of justified all the busy that they have, like, I'm a good busy, or I just got to get through X, Y, and Z. So, uh, some of the crazy answers I've heard, they're not, I mean, it's simple things. They're really not, it's often people. It's often something that they're tolerating with other people. Sometimes it's a boundaries thing with people they work with. For business owners, a lot of the times, sometimes it's a business partner, sometimes it's a conflict with a key employee. Sometimes it's something's going on with one of their kids that they don't know how, they really are struggling for resources on how to handle that. So I don't really, it's those are not the craziest answers. Sometimes it's, I hate what I do. I mean, or I hate this thing that I've created. That's usually one that, nothing surprises me anymore, though, to be perfectly honest. because it's usually hard stuff. It's not usually like I have this one client that drives me crazy. Okay, well, let's talk about how to set some boundaries and then also figure out how to fill out or, backfill the income you get from that one client so that you can fire that one client. That's that's a straightforward solution. So the things that I usually hear are not that easy because to me that one is easy. If it's like one or two clients you really don't like working with, usually it's a whole ball of wax that I will hear from that question, and I just let them tell me. Like I let them tell me. Uh, I think one of the funniest things I heard was that I had a business owner whose partner would not help with the care of the pets. They had like three pets, and the business owner was running the business and also dealing with two aging pets. And if anybody's ever done that, like that is heartbreaking. It's also such a struggle, and there's a lot of vet visits, and there's a lot of like tracking of things and giving medications and all kinds of that. That was something, I think that's the only one that I can really think of right now that was just like, I haven't heard that before. I've only heard it once. So that's one of the kind of crazier things that I heard. But most of the times it's the day in, day out grind of what they do that they're tolerating. And so we have to untangle that and then put it back together in a way that doesn't cause them to continue to be burned out.
Yeah. Well, the last question I always ask is, if every private practitioner in the world were listening right now, what would you want them to know?
I would want them to know, first of all, how important they are. Second of all, you have to keep your own. You have so many people depending on you for their mental health and their burnout prevention that you have to practice what you preach and take care of yourself first so that you can continue to care for those individuals. So take care of yourself. Self-care is so important, especially for professionals who are dealing with other people's challenges and difficulties all day, every day. So make sure you know what burnout looks like for you specifically. You got to know what it looks like and then have some measurable ways to prevent it and to keep it from burning you out all the way, because business owners and all your clients that you serve need you and need your help in protecting their mental health. But that starts with you protecting your own.
So awesome. Well, if people want to connect with you, if they want to follow you, learn more about what you teach, get your book, any of those things, where should we send them?
Yeah, the best place is to go to my website. It's thejulieb.com, and everything is out there. I actually have a burnout quiz on my website. It's right there on the homepage. You can find it. And it's free. It's no opt-in required, so you don't even have to put your email in if you don't want to get some, immediate advice about what's burning you out and maybe some things you can do to help you. And then you can also find my book there as well.
So awesome. Well, Julie, thank you so much for being on the Practice of the Practice podcast.
Yeah, Joe, thanks for having me. Great conversation. And I hope it helps your audience and helps them prevent burnout.
I want to challenge you to think about trying one new thing. In 2019, my friend Pete, he and I had done a brief podcast together called The Capitalist, and it was all about capitalism and happiness and kind of the intersection of those two things. And, we're friends. He owns a local brewery. He invited me to just try improv. And, at that time, I was so busy with two little kids. But for a while, every Tuesday was it still is. Every Tuesday that's my thing. If I had been like, no, I'm too busy, or I can't make time for that, and I don't want to put another thing on the kid's mom, I would have missed out on something that brings me such joy. And so I want to encourage you to find something weird to try. My friend Paul invited me to go curling once, and I'm like, this is crazy and weird and awesome. Try something new. Try a hobby. You never know what's going to give you this whole new social community. Since it started, improv in Traverse City started with, I think, 5 of us meeting in a after-hours physical therapy office that just had room we now have like 40 people that are being trained every single week in improv. Like there's this growing improv scene in Traverse City, in this small little northern Michigan town, all because just a handful of us got together and we were ridiculous. And now it's like this really cool social, like a new social group that is all ages and, you know, such diversity, and it's just given me so much life. So I want to encourage you to try something weird, try something you haven't done. And it might help you not burn out as well, because we need you in the world. We need you to stick around, to be doing this work for a really long time. You know, speaking of really long time, Therapy Notes has been with us for a really long time as a sponsor, and they just let us know that they're coming back next year, and they are the best electronic health records out there. If you're still using one of those other sites, you are missing out on so many features that are included at probably a lower price. So you can get a couple months for free. Use promo code Joe at checkout over at therapynotes.com. They'll help you switch all of your clients over. You can do your billing through it. You can do all of your HIPAA compliant video. Everything stays organized. You know, it's like those apps and websites that help you stay organized are just so valuable. And for just such a great price, Therapy Notes can help you out with that. So try Therapy Notes today. Use promo code Joe at checkout so they know that this podcast is working, and you also get those free months as well. Thank you so much for hanging out with me and for letting me into your ears and into your brain. I almost forgot. Don't forget about Level Up Week. That is right around the corner. That's going to be kicking off on September 16th. We're going to be doing 16 webinars in 4 days with all sorts of panels and people that are presenting on multi-location practices, so many different things. So join us over at practicethepractice.com/level up. And thanks again for letting us into your ears and into your brain. Have a good day. I'll talk to you soon. Special thanks to the band Silence is Sexy for that intro music, and this podcast is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information in regard to the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the host, the producers, the publishers, or guests are rendering legal, accounting, clinical, or other professional information. If you want a professional, you should find one.